Picture this. You've been working with your team for months. You've repeatedly requested data and for more specific outcomes for your project's activities, but your asks have gone unanswered by the program staff or organization's leaders. Ultimately, you prepare a proposal draft that feels lackluster and your expectations are not high for success. Perhaps some of you already know this feeling, and for those that don't, I applaud you. As grants professionals, we've likely all been involved in submitting an application for a project that we knew had no chance of getting awarded. The disappointment from those rejections are not exactly welcome, but they're also not exactly unexpected. The rejection of a proposal that you were sure would win is a different kind of defeat, though, one that's not welcome and not at all expected. They can hurt us in a deep way and can be hard for a grants professional to bounce back from. The majority of my professional career has been in the higher education development space. And a key skill we develop in that environment is how to help students face, process, and grow from rejection, disappointment, and pain. As I've helped grant-seeking groups deal with proposal rejection, it's clear that these same skills are needed by grants professionals, and what's more, they can be developed, sharpened, and used in our daily lives. It's completely natural to want to turn as quickly as possible away from rejection, to focus on brighter days ahead and not dwell on past pain. But student development professionals know that those same kinds of rejections can be where some of the most growth can happen. So what if we treated grant rejection the way that educators treat student setbacks, as teachable, developmentally significant moments to build our own resilience? Let's face it, even the best among us will face rejection of our best proposal, and we probably all face a lot of rejection. So instead of squandering these opportunities for learning and growth, how can we lean into these moments of challenge and rise from them stronger and more prepared for the next deadline? In order to consider how to reframe rejection, it's first important to consider what our common responses to rejection tend to be. From an individual level, it can be typical to experience a certain amount of shock or disbelief, even denial when we face any kind of rejection, whether from a proposal we thought would win or to a job we thought we'd be offered. The intensity of any of these reactions tends to correspond with the desire or expectation that we'd placed upon the acceptance we'd hoped for. Perhaps even more concerning, though, are the ways we tend to personalize rejection, saying that I failed, or I wasn't good enough, or I didn't write in a convincing enough way. Maybe most common, though, is the habit of just avoiding rejection altogether, in fear of dwelling on it, choosing not to acknowledge it at all. These kinds of responses can also be seen on the group level, too, with groups seeking to blame others or blame specific members of the group for their rejection. It can lead them to be more risk-averse in the future as they seek to avoid the possibility of further rejection in their next proposal. A key point to remember in these reactions is that more so than any of these being any more or less helpful, it's imperative to understand that your reactions to rejection shape your future behavior. If you let unhelpful or defensive reactions be your primary response, they will lead you to unhelpful and defensive grant-seeking behaviors in the future. Reframing rejection as an opportunity for resilience building can help you better cope with rejection in the moment and set you and your team up for more healthy grant-seeking behaviors in the future. In years in college student development, a concept that helped me counsel students through rejection was helping to understand failure and rejection as a kind of transition. When we face rejection, the emotional impact often hits before any kind of strategic analysis can happen, but the analysis is essential to learning from failure. Transition theory can help you and your team to slow down and ask better questions, questions that lead to learning instead of self-blame, avoidance, or disengagement. Coping with transition can be best done by paying attention to what one of the theorists behind transition theory, Jane Goodman, called the 4 S's: situation, self, support, and strategies. Use these 4 S's to guide your team, or just yourself, through your next rejection to reframe it as an opportunity for resilience. For understanding the first S, the situation, You're looking to uncover what actually happened and what didn't. Grant rejection can often feel personal, but the situation itself, when viewed from a more objective standpoint, is usually more complex and more outside of our control than we assume. Ask yourself, and have each member of your team ask themselves, what brought this change about? Was the funding amount cut? Was it a highly competitive cycle? Was there a discernible shift in the funder's priorities? Having some of these answers often requires a bit of digging or even reaching out to the funder themselves to get some feedback. Also ask what the broader context of this rejection is. Were there political, economic, or geographic factors in play that are outside of your control? Political factors may have influenced the American grant landscape most strongly in the past 12 months. And so it's important that we, as grants professionals, grasp what is in and what is not in our control regarding our context. Separate the controllable factors from the structural realities to gain greater clarity and a more objective perspective as you consider the situation you find yourself in. Beyond the situation, next ask yourself and your team questions about the next S, self. Assessing your own and your team's internal resources. Who are you and who are we in light of this rejection? Draw off your personal experience with rejection. Has something like this happened before? Is this rejection truly unique? Or is there something in your grant-seeking history which you can draw a comparison to? When faced with rejection, do you tend toward rumination, avoidance, or blame? What about the team? Does your team have experience dealing with rejection in the past? How have they handled it? Has it been used as a tool for learning, or do you tend to move on as quickly as possible away from it? Where has your team been resilient in the face of rejection, and where has it been brittle, letting rejection serve as a more defining characteristic of the team? In light of all these questions, it's important to consider again that all grants professionals have and will continue to face rejection. Strong grants professionals don't avoid these moments of disappointment. They recognize it without letting it define their competence or identity. Questions that help consider the next S, support, are aimed at understanding what the state of relationships are with you and your team, assessing the culture and what within it helps build resilience or tend toward fragility in the face of rejection. Getting a good read on relationships and culture is important because rejection is harder in isolation and easier in psychologically safe environments. Ask yourself and your team what supports exist. Who can you lean on to help process this rejection in a healthy way? Perhaps most pointedly, ask whether your team feels that it's safe to talk openly about rejection or whether it's really only safe to talk about wins. How can you and your team help to normalize rejection, not as a way of accepting a kind of mediocrity, but as a way of recognizing that there are so many factors outside of our control that can lead to rejection? And so it's important to see it as a normal part of grant seeking, and it needs to be processed in a healthy way. Providing intentional spaces for debrief is essential to creating a culture that does not fear rejection, because a culture that fears rejection also fears discussing rejection and fears growing from rejection. Teams that treat rejection as a private failure weaken their grant culture. Organizations that treat it as a shared experience, one to be dealt with openly, honestly, and with others, strengthens trust and institutional resilience. The final S is strategy, where you and your team commit to a process of making meaning out of and moving forward with the knowledge that you've gained from a healthy processing of rejection. Asking yourself and your team how you will use this experience rather than just survive it makes all the difference here, turning rejection from being devastating to being developmental. What did this proposal teach us about grant seeking, about the alignment of our project to the funder's priorities, about our readiness to try again elsewhere, and how soon? What assumptions did we make about this proposal, and how were these confirmed or challenged? How will the lessons learned through this experience shape our future grant-seeking behaviors? The goal here is not to make you and your team feel better about the rejection. The goal is to make this rejection useful. Using the 4 S's as a guiding framework for reflection is a helpful tool to deal with one of the most frequent and unpleasant experiences of grant seekers. And as you work through these questions with your team or for your own self-reflection, keep in mind that while it would be great to receive fewer rejections for your proposals, the goal of this reflection exercise is not to necessarily have fewer rejections, but instead have better responses to them, to use them as a tool for growth and resilience. Every declined proposal can be viewed as either a closed door or as a classroom.